Good evening and welcome to the Icecast Live. My name is Shane Chebsey and next to me, as always, faithfully, Mr. Ollie McManee.
Good evening to you, Shane. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yes, I thought that might happen. For our one viewer out there watching loyally and religiously, Shane's having a problem with his internet.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this could be a very disturbing hour with just myself and our guest speaking. Hopefully he'll be doing most of the speaking.
Well, the annoying thing is I can't tell when I'm cutting off. So it always looks smooth to me. I can hear you. You just can't hear me, which is really annoying.
We'll get more viewers that way. And he still doesn't know. So I'll have to tell you, Shane, you are cut off again. But I can hear you, though, from time to time.
Well, you can just hit like a normal volume.
Is Shrewsbury that far out in the sticks? It's got no... I know you've only just had electricity because the glow from behind you looks like you've got all the candles on.
It's just a bit of dim light, you know. I've relocated right next to my router.
And it's still playing up, goodness me. You'll have to turn it on and off again every now and again, Shane. But when you come back on again, without wasting any more of your valuable time, why don't we get our guest on for today, Shane?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's run that VT, Sam, and get going with the show. Hello and welcome back to the Icecast, and welcome, Stephan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great to see you. As earlier,
we are very pleased to have you. I'll be his translator. But before we get started, that looks like a very busy and exciting room. Is that in your office, in your studio, or does every room look like that in your house?
No, it's just my studio, but I spend like 20 hours a day in here, so it's like it's become my house within my house, you know.
I imagine it gives you a lot of satisfaction when you're slaving over an artboard just to look up at some of that magnificent artwork.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, you have to feel inspired. You kind of need to be in the zone, you know. What's really funny is like some of these books that you're seeing behind me, because I grew up in France, right? I've been in America for 30 years, you know, but some of these books, those are my, books I had when I was a kid, right? So sometimes I go like, oh, wait. And then I go back and open something that I haven't opened in literally 35 years or something like that. And like the dust and the mold nearly kills me, you know, but I know it's there, and that's you know.
Yeah. I think any comic book nerd will be able to associate with that. Yeah, I'm the same. And like you say, you can pick up a book. I dare say that's a lot of Mobius in there as well as American titles.
Yeah. That's right. You know, I grew up in so my parents had a store in near Paris in the outskirts, you know, and that sold everything, you know, like, mostly cigarettes, but also books, comic books, magazines, bus fare, you know, like the essentials, you know. And so I kind of grew up in there. And so we had all the French comics, we had the American comics, and it's really interesting. And the thing, I don't know how it was in England, but in France, you know, because they were so protective of the markets, like all the American comics, let alone the British comics, didn't really arrive until like the mid 70s. And so when I was a little kid, like let's say in the late 70s, that's when everything was arriving. So on the racks at the exact same time, you had the current comics, but you also had the British, current from America. Then you had the British comics. You had like reprints of old adventure strips from the 40s. You had the Golden Age stuff. You had the early Marvel Age. It was all together, you know. So to me, it's kind of all came at once, like a tidal wave, you know.
It's something we've mentioned to a number of American creators, because they just didn't have that eclectic mix of comics. Like your Asterix is on one hand, your Valerian on another hand, and then Spider-Man right through the middle. It makes for a very heady experience. And certainly the few times I went to France as a child with school trips, I was quite amazed how everything was mixed together. It was the first time I came across Milo Manara as a 12-year-old innocent in a supermarket.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, that
was quite an eye-opener. Yeah.
I know.
But they've always had a healthier view of comics, even back then in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm assuming that love of comics got you inspired and got you onto the road that you've been on ever since.
Yeah, I mean, because so my parents had those comics, and they also had my dad at a photo studio in the basement, and he was selling like Super 8 millimeter films, like of the clips of the Disney movies, right? So I had and then we had like direct line to getting film processed through the store and stuff. So like I started to, so to me it was all one thing, like comics, literature, magazine, film. It was all one thing. Animation. Never thought that, so I grew up doing all of those things. And I saw the movie Heavy Metal when I was 13, and I was like, proof positive that you can put it all in one thing, and so I started, that became my thing. And then I went to school for animation in France at Gobelin in Paris, and that was around the time that Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that was animated in London, came out and completely changed the landscape. Because comics went from like this being a sort of dying, not comics, I mean animation went from being a dying art form to being the stuff of blockbusters all of a sudden. So by the time I graduated, there was this whole opening of the industry, this new golden age of animation. So I got, I went in there and kind of left comics behind a little bit. And so I get to do a lot of really fun stuff. And about 10 years ago, I was starting to get a little, I felt like, animation, I've kind of have done it, because it had to do with the kind of stories that I really wanted to tell, and that we weren't really allowed, to tell those stories, and so I spent a lot of time working on, like, for instance, I would be setting up a movie somewhere that was superhero in animation, but not as a not as a parody or anything like that, but really like legitimately doing it. And the studios get excited, and then they would always turn back to like, but can we do it more like Despicable Me, Despicable Me, which ironically I had worked on, and so I had a lot to do with that. So I love that. It's great, but this is not what this is. So I was kind of getting a little bit frustrated that, animation, we're not, I love the art form, but I'm not quite getting to tell the stories that I want to tell, and just around that time, I just remember like, hey, and by the way, remember comics, your also first love, and you've always wanted to go back to that, and so 10 years ago I said, you know what, I'm gonna get back professionally into comics. And that's when I started Silver and stuff, about Planet Comics and all that stuff. And so there's been it kind of took over my life, and just a couple of years ago, I was just about ready to go, all right, then I was just animation was just gonna call it done and really focus solely on comics and adaptation and stuff like, and just around that time, that's when I get the call from Marvel to come, help them do What If, and it was like,
never heard of it.
Never, me neither. And so like, oh, you mean like doing the kind of stuff in animation that I've been trying to force them to do for 20 years, and now they want to do it? Yeah, dude, I'm in. So I, and so I'm still kind of fully engaged in both, you know.
That's amazing. Now you covered quite a lot there. You talked
Sorry.
about the four volumes of Silver that we want to unpick. Obviously, you talk about What If as well. Let's try and do it in chronological order, because Silver's a very interesting concept. Obviously, it deals with the world of Van Helsing and Dracula, but several decades later. Now, I know you did it through a Kickstarter. Are there any plans for republishing it? With I mean, horror always seems to be one of those genres that are always on the rise. And I was wondering whether any publishing houses have shown an interest in those volumes.
Yeah, so you know, when I you know, I've always had like an entrepreneurial streak myself. I mean, as I said, my parents had a store. I grew up in the store, you know, like you know, behind the counter, you know, with like selling cigarettes to old dudes who are trying to cheat me out of the change, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, and so when I started doing comics again, you know, I quickly realized that I wanted to do, if I was gonna put in the effort to do this completely autonomously, I needed to also control the distribution, and that between the conventions, we were like an open field, and the direct market in America, that is, you know, now it's changed a little bit, but at the time it was very, very simple to work with, because there's only one distributor, so just get them interested, and then you're in stores, and then, you know, so all that stuff was so I realized that, you know what, if I'm going to do comics, it's like the old joke, you know, like how to publish a great you know, how to make $1 million into easy steps, you know, step one, find $1 million. And I was like, how to publish a book into easy steps, step one, have a book to publish, you know. And so as I was building Silver, and I was like, okay, this exists, you know, I realized that, you know, I'm going to publish it, I want to control this. So that's when I started Dark Planet Comics, and very quickly, you know, it worked, you know, in the sense that we started like a convention presence that grew and grew and grew, and unfortunately with COVID we haven't gotten back, but you know, it really grew to like a booth that was really like a really active pop-up stores where we were selling a lot of books and a lot of stuff, and it was really, you know, it's great. And the direct market, you know, has embraced it too, and so you know, so all this to say that just I re-entered the comic business as an artist and writer, but also as a publisher, and I've been loving that. But then you know, at some point we so Silver is now in development at Netflix as a movie, so you know, knock on wood, movie gods willing, you know, all that stuff, but you know, and so so we knew that we needed to partner up with a bigger entity to bring the publishing of Silver to even a wider audience. And although, trust me, all on our own, we sold a lot of freaking books, but still we wanted to take it to the next level. And so we found a great partnership with Abrams Comic Arts, and just creatively and humanly, and they're just a wonderful group, and they have obviously the ability to take Silver in publishing and give it a life to at the next level. So that's what's happening there. And so in fact, right now the window of Dark Planet publishing Silver has closed as of the end of last year, right, the end of 2021. So some stores, you may still be able to find it at your local comic shop if they still have some copies and stuff, but we're not shipping anything else now. The new edition will come out from Abrams.
It's going to be very collectible then. The old ones.
I know. Especially, you know what, the thing that we did, that it's like a reader gave me the idea. Just a fan who came by 1 year at one con, and because I was telling him that we were going to do, because you know, these 4 trades, and then we were going to do a you know, a hardcover, and he said, you know what you guys should do is like a collectible slipcase, because that way you can sell your trades as a box set, but also is great for the people who've been reading it, supporting it from the start, because they can buy the box by itself and collect their trades. So that way you're not penalized for having been an early reader. It's just, it fits, and you know, even if you got the books 3 years ago, you get the, here is actually, you get the box set, right?
Very nice.
That's nice.
And so whether you get the whole thing all at once, you know, or you you just you've collected the books over the years as they were coming out, you get the box, you end up with the same product. So that was a brilliant idea, and it's been so that box set is for sure a collectible.
Definitely. I've seen a few publishers do that actually, and it works really well for the exact reasons that you cited there. It doesn't annoy the, you know, those early supporters. It gives them something extra, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So as well as Silver in the comics world, you're working on a new project now as well.
Right. Well, we can look at the some of the pictures if you want, so people can visualize. So Silver was in black and white because it's, I don't think I even told people what it's about. So it's, as you said, it's in the world that's inspired by the Bram Stoker kind of universe, you know, and so we have this group of con men who, it takes place 40 years later into the noir pulp era, and you have this group of con men who team up with this woman who's a vampire hunter to steal this precious treasure that's hidden in a castle full of vampires, right? So we're like,
love it.
You go wrong with that, right? So so it's really fun, and just because it's it harkens back to the kind of this pulp era, the you know, I wanted something that feels really modern, but that kind of there immediately. So I went with this kind of modern take on the classic adventure strip type black and white stuff with screen tones. And so, yeah, because like when you look at, sometimes when you do a black and white book, sometimes the danger might be that it looks like a color book that's missing its colors.
Yeah.
And for Silver, like really the idea was to do a full, complete statement in black and white that there's hardly any room to, that you couldn't, you know, that's not missing anything. It's a complete statement. And so, you know, it's very expressionistic. It's very mysterious. A lot of the stuff is more suggested than it is shown. But, you know, there's a lot of action. And the genre of it is, so there's obviously horror elements because we're in this Dracula sort of world, but it's actually more like an epic adventure stories, like a big pulp adventure, you know, it's kind of swashbuckling. Like this is in the middle of volume 3, there's like, you know, there's like an action sequence that literally goes on uninterrupted for 60 pages with hardly any dialogue. It's just action. That's
fantastic.
And so, and the other thing too that I discovered from Silver is because I come from this film background, that I was really trying to, because, you know, when I started doing the conventions, one thing that happened very quickly is people started to come by and said, hey, I love your book because I'm not a hardcore comic reader. So we had the hardcore comic readers, but we also had people who were like, hey, you know what? I've been trying to get into comics before, but I just couldn't because I always get confused by the storytelling. But yours, for whatever reason, it's like watching a movie and I'm into it. And now I'm a huge comic fan, but that was kind of my getaway drugs, which I thought was wonderful, you know? And that's because I'm kind of trying to put a lot of film language in it. And by film language, what I mean is not that every panel looks like a screen, you know? What I mean by that is that character, you know, the characters don't switch side willy-nilly, or there's a lot of the stuff that makes film language everybody's second language that we all understand by now. I'm putting it in there, but I'm trying to combine that with like a uniqueness to the page, that each page is also unique as its own kind of piece of art, you know, because that's the other thing that I sometimes disappoints me, you know, if I'm reading a comic, if I feel like, if, you know, the editor was to unfortunately drop the pages on the ground, they would be hard pressed to know in which order they go, because it's all like talking heads talking and just like, you know. And so, but when you look at the like a couple of years ago, like I think the last year of conventions we did was 2019, and I was at this collector's house, which has this insane collection of original, some goes from the Dark Knight Returns to like Alex Raymond and everything in between, and you look at all those pages, or even like I went to a Kirby exhibit that we had in LA like a few years ago, and you look at and oh yeah, it's that page, it's that page, it's that page. It's not just we're not just churning the storytelling, it's that page. So what I'm trying to do is combine the uniqueness of the page and then make it being a graphic statement, but told with a storytelling that has kind of like the strictures of like, let's say the cinematic quality in such that it keeps you oriented at all times, and you never not know who's talking.
Of course, all the great comic artists, that you cited there and their contemporaries, they worked in that style, didn't they? They had very cinematic styles. Their storytelling was absolutely amazing, which was why the Marvel explosion in the 60s was so successful. They were all fantastic storytellers, and it's nice to see that legacy being continued in some modern comics, but not all, unfortunately.
And what's really great, so that what if you look at the books from that era, the storytelling is highly compressed. Like Jack Kirby was able to tell you a massive cosmic story in 18 pages. And you felt like you didn't feel like you were missing anything. You felt like you had entered this massive story, but it was all told so economically in terms of the storytelling, and it was so compressed. So that's wonderful. And then you get to the 80s, and you have all the books that really like sealed forever my love of the art form, which are all the great graphic novels of the 80s, mid the 80s, all that stuff, where it's like they're basically doing the great American novel, but with the characters that I was in love with when I was 10 years old. And so that storytelling is very decompressed, right? Like you can watch a page in The Watchmen, and there's like, it takes a whole page for Rorschach to sneak up on that guy who was in the bar, who was not, you know what I'm saying? And then you get to that page, that masterful page of Dr. Manhattan in Vietnam, and in one page, you understand all you ever need to know about his involvement in the Vietnam War, right? So that's what I'm trying to do to the best of my abilities, is to combine a compression of storytelling when I'm hitting the tropes, so that you get, here it is, I'm serving it to you, but we'll get it, so I'm not going to be late with this.
You don't need to go on, do you, when it's a trope like that? You know what's going to happen. You can take those shortcuts, can't you?
So we all love this page. It's great. It serves everything you need to know, but it's just one page or one drawing. And then what if it's something where you kind of want a play-by-play of it, for those kind of suspense or whatever, because it's more immersive kind of approach, then I kind of deconstruct, and it can be a full page for a character making this one decision, but then you see the wheels turning in their head. So trying to just I guess I'm going back to this idea that the way I discovered comics, it was all at once from all those eras. So all their different, like whatever the trend was at the time, they all came to me as options that actually work really well when you combine them.
And it's great that you can combine that, because there are so many great things you can take from all of those influences. They're all valid in their own way, aren't they? Dark Knight Returns works in one way. Flash Gordon works in another way. They're all wonderful.
Yes, exactly. It's all just our kind of heritage that we just get to play with.
Yeah.
And your years as an animator must really help in the pacing of an issue. I mean, you mentioned the 60-page fight scene with minimal dialogue. I mean, you must be able to have picked up a lot of tricks of the trade to be able to translate that onto a printed page.
Yeah, in movies, what you always say is show don't tell, right? But also there's moments, and people don't talk about that as much, where you have to tell, don't show, right? For instance, you think of the end of Blade Runner, right? Where you have, the scene where Rutger Hauer is dying on the roof and he says, the things I saw, 10 Hauser Gate, blah, blah, blah. You could very easily imagine a lesser filmmaker with a bigger budget. So I'd go like, and then you cut back to those and you see the starships on fires and you think, but that's not the point of the scene, because the point of the scene is not the starships on fire. The point of the scene is the human connection between two people who turns out are not human, spoiler alert, but neither of them, and yet they find this shared humanity, right? So at that moment you want to tell, don't show, because the telling is actually the showing, right? So that when you're trained, when you work in film, whether it's animation or live action, which is after, first and foremost a visual language, is like when I'm on the plane and I watch like a big big blockbuster, like a big kind of thing on the plane, it's because it's so noisy, so annoying. I don't even put the sound. I just look at the images, right? And you understand everything. There's of course there's a layer that you didn't get. You didn't get some of the jokes. You didn't get some of the whatever.
Yeah.
But you get what's happening without the sound. And so when you work in film, you learn to tell story that 99% is so clear that you can watch the movie without the sound and you still understand what's happening, right?
That's
and
so
then
true.
Yeah, and then you really use the dialogue, to access that other level, but you don't blow, your dialogue kind of bandwidth, on trying to explain stuff that should be self-evident visually. So the thing in animation is, traditionally in feature animation, which is where I come from, there's really a writing process that is very similar to what you would call the Marvel method. In the sense that, the Marvel method being that, Stanley, Stanley would say, hey, it's Doc Ock and Spidey and they're fighting on the train, go, right? And then John Romita or somebody, would get that and do the storytelling without the dialogue. Again, he would create that movie that makes perfect sense when you watch it on the plane without the earphones, right? And then somebody would come in and add dialogue, this, that, blah, 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 right? So that was the Marvel method, right? And so in animation, it's very much like that, where we write on the page, but we also write on the boards, right? Meaning that we storyboard and create sequences that, if it's something you could, maybe in the script it says, and battle ensues, and in this battle she finds a spine, right? It's just all you need. And then this will come out a lot better if a visual artist starts to visualize and get in and perform that sequence, as opposed to typing and then the car falls over the bridge, which will give you the idea but will not give you like the immersive. It's not going to really convey the energy of the moment, or the how does it fall? Is it flipping around? Is it, what I mean? It's just like there's stuff that is beyond. It's just like words sometimes are beyond images. Also, sometimes images are beyond words, and so you have to use one or the other. And so when I do the books, for instance, I start with a fully written script that looks exactly like a movie script, because when I write, I cannot go like panel 1, the hand goes up, panel 2. My brain doesn't think like that, because I'm in visual storytelling mode. So when I'm writing, I'm just writing a script, which is like a movie script, and then I go and I break down the book. I do layouts and stuff like. So I rough out the thing, and I put in the dialogue already. And already I can see, just by virtue of performing the drawings, I can see that, oh, this is where it gets false in the script. So I fix it, and then once that's working, then I do the final pass on the drawings, where I work out the drawings, I ink them and stuff like that. And then when I have the fully inked drawings, then of the whole book, then I redo a dialogue pass, because now maybe there's an expression that is so clear in the drawing that, man, I don't need the guy saying this, because we get it visually, but I couldn't see that until I had executed the drawing to a point where like there's a performance in it that carries it. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I'm like, oh boy, there's kind of a leap here that no one's going to understand. So better come up with some clever dialogue that bridges it. You know what I mean? So that's the process for me.
I love how comics can do that. It's quite unique, you know, that you can go backwards and forwards in that way between story, script, art, storytelling. You can keep correcting until you get it right. And I think Stan Lee.
I'm sure he was going to make a reference to Stan Lee and the way he would loosely plot before getting Jack Kirby. Is that what you're going to say, Shay?
Well,
put you back on.
But I think that loose plotting actually was a great thing because it allowed Jack Kirby or John Buscema to do their thing. You know, it allowed them to shine as storytellers because it wasn't controlling. You know, he wasn't trying to control everything that was happening.
Well, that's how John Byrne worked as well, wasn't it? Because he was often writing his own art, he would sort of kind of do both at once. And I suppose that's probably why he was so prolific back in the 80s, producing 2 or 3 comic books a month sometimes.
Yeah. You know, it's my personal theory, honestly, for what it's worth, you know, but I feel like we live in this very dualistic culture where everything is organized between a high form and a low form, you know, like body and soul, you know, blue collar, white collar, whatever. It's always like there's always some sort of elevated, you know. And so, unfortunately, storytelling is broken down where people see writing, in terms of like putting words together, as the high form. And like, for instance, when I do conventions, like one of the thing that amuses me the most is like when people come, and it happens a lot, where, you know, people come in and say, "Oh, you do art," and you know, or they get confused because there's not a lot of people who do both. You know, so they're more used to, oh, you're the penciler, you're the inker, you're the writer, you're this and that. But they don't say, you know, they don't say, are you the writer or the artist? They say, are you the author or the artist?
Oh,
here's the difference, right? So, and it was like, but no, it's just like, this is the, you know, obviously, so it's, of course, it's amusing, you know, people can, this is not their trade. They may, you know, not know.
You have to laugh.
Language is fine. You have to laugh, and they don't mean it in any way, but you can feel the sort of the shorthand that the culture has with, are you the mind who created this, or are you the pencil monkey who drew it up? You know what I mean? It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. The two work together in harmony, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think it is quite hard for, you know, people who don't work in the industry or even if they're not, you know, heavily involved in the industry in some way, to actually understand that, to understand those intricacies of creativity and how storytelling evolves, especially if you've got a team, you know, and different teams work in different ways. I mean, there are writers who write.
I think I know what he's going to say. Let me guess.
You go.
I think Shane, you were going to say that there's writers who describe a lot, and there's like basically direct from the page.
Yeah,
Stanley, and then there's Alan Moore.
Right, who's off the charts. But you know, and then writers who are like more like just putting the dialogue and you know, and there's no right or wrong. It's like whatever works for you. It's all a performance. It's all how you're performing that story from like a, you know, and you kind of manifest it, you know, and so it's all fine, you know, but it's definitely a more collaborative and a more kind of iterative process than people imagine it to be.
Well, of course, because you could give the same script to 3 different artists, and I've seen these kind of experiments online, and each artist is going to pass in something very, very different, and that's the excitement, I suppose, of comics. That you know, even after all these years of reading comics, there's always something exciting to see. How they use a page, how maybe I always remember one of my favourite scenes was the death of Terror in the New Teen Titans, and George Perez had decided to take Marv Wolfman's script and just have a very narrow, thin panel with a very, very, very distant shot of Gar Logan over Terror. No words whatsoever, but it was just so impactful, and that stayed with me so many decades later. And of course, this is George Perez, who fills every title with all sorts of detail, but pulling back like that It really worked.
Yeah,
and he really had to.
Yeah,
he
I
knew
mean,
when it was
it's
right
that's
time.
you're right, and you know, it's the thing that I've learned, you know, working with some like really, really great storytellers, like in animation, for instance, where it's always like one question: what is this panel about? Well, it's like no. What is it about? And there's always a finer point, a finer brush of what it actually is about. That when you get to, then you make different choices, you know what I mean? And you know, they may be bold choices, but if it's the right choice for the right moment, you know, and it's always about, but what is this about really, you know? Like I was saying, is it about a guy talking about the crazy stuff he saw in space, or is it about two guys lying on a roof, sharing their humanity that they had to find without it being given to them, you know, originally? You know, what is it about? You know what I mean? That's the one question that I think, and you can't think of it like it has to be more organic. I mean, I don't know, maybe some people are very like, there you go, there it is.
I feel like
that's the typical George Perez rubble. What happens is after that, it's the page after that. But yeah, you've got the right issue, the Judas Contract. Still a classic even now, even though it does establish Deathstroke as a paedophile, doesn't it? That storyline.
It was a different time.
It was.
Time. Yeah.
Now, still on the subject of storytelling, then, Stephan. Of course, the rule of thumb in comics, all we're led to believe, is every page has to be a page turner. Now, how do you therefore? And I think you've talked about how you write for yourself. But how is the writing of a comic and the pacing of a comic different to maybe working on animation?
So, you know, that's a great question. You know, when you write a script for the screen, which are, you know, basically there's this kind of unit of 10 pages. Every 10 pages is like a mini cycle. It's, you know, there's those movements that run in about 10 pages. At the end of 10 pages,
is each page about a minute's worth of film?
Well, that's on average over the script, but it's hard to say for any given page, because you could have, as they say, dialogue eats up the page and action eats up the screen, right? Like you'd have 3 words that says, and the whole city blows up, and it's just 3 words, but there's going to be a lot of screen time, you know, and everybody dies one by one, right? And then that's 20 minutes of movie, right, in 6 words. Or you could have very verbose people kind of doing a shtick and stuff like that, and that's going to look like 3 pages, but they'll be done in 20 seconds. So, but on average, it kind of breaks down to 1 page a minute, so they say. But when you read the script, let's sort of say a 120-page script, those, you know, every 10 pages is like a segment that has its own little arc, and that's, you know, and so when I started Silver, and I wrote it as a film script in that format, it was 120 pages, and it became clear that every one of those 10-page segment was perfect for an issue.
Right.
And so 10 pages became an issue, 12 issues became the whole series. And so on average, I would say that, again, it depends on, I guess I was saying it, but on average, that one screenplay page turns for me into 3 pages of comics. Now, that being said, the way I worked when I'm laying out the pages is I'm always working double pages. I'm always working the spread, because to me the spread's a unit. So, and then that way you turn and you're in a different place, or maybe you have several spreads, right? Like, for example, if you go to the images, to the one in color from that other series I'm doing, Palomino, like the one when they're talking in the kitchen, for instance, you'll totally see how that's sort of thought of. The spread is a unit, and then, you know, that scene happens to be like maybe 4 or 5 spreads, I can't remember, but I
think I don't think Sam's in the office at the moment.
Oh, all right. Well, then
Sam's got young children that he always tends to put to bed when we're on air.
Well,
I'd have kept them up a bit longer if it was me.
Well, but then let's stay on this one, for instance. We're in the middle of this action sequence, and Sledge, she's the vampire hunter, and she's chasing these 2 vampires, who's stolen a couple of babies. And so like here's this spread is from the moment, and that this is taking place in this old kind of windmill that's grinding. There's a grinding wheel that's going around, so you can see how that's going to go badly. But so it starts from she gets, so like the previous page was they're they're on the ride and they get, oh, here's the windmill and we're getting to the bottom of it and we're on our way up, we're catching the wheel going up. Now we cut to this spread and it's like from the moment she sets foot into the scene to like the second vampire gets the drop on her and she blocks the blow. You know what I mean? So it's like it's a moment, it's a mini scene within the scene, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do. That every spread has like some sort of autonomous storytelling
story
moment.
within a story, almost.
Yeah, it's a beat,
mini story. Yeah,
right. It could be one beat, it could be two beats, it could be five beats, but it's a complete set of beats that are thematically related.
And it works exceptionally well on this spread. I love the way it goes from, you're basically in front of the character and then on the next page you're behind the character, like the page has turned.
Right.
I really like that. I like that transition. That's really good.
Thank you. Yeah, see, that's the other thing too I'm trying to do is that my panels quote unquote cut, like shots from a movie cut together, because there's a way that when you watch a movie that you're used to seeing one image turn into another, like shot, like I would say a shot turn into another shot, and there's rules, or rules is the wrong word for it, but there's definitely an art form to what cuts with what. And if you just care to apply that to the comic panels, then they will cut. Then you will not have weird kind of redundancies or visual repetitions and stuff like that. And then you get to control a flow of storytelling, that feels like it has a flow.
I feel, I've been studying the art of comics for many years, and I feel like I'm learning a lot tonight.
Studying the art comics, reading comics. That's what you mean. Studying. I've never heard.
I've drawn comics as well, Ollie. I draw comics as well.
That's true.
But I'm learning here. This is a fantastic conversation, Stephan. It really is. But just to go off comics for a little moment. We spoke a little bit offline about it, but obviously you were involved in the Iron Giant, which is which is very close to my heart. I know Ollie's a big fan as well. And Sam, and we were talking about how the Iron Giant sort of gave a resurgence to 2D animation when 3D was starting to come in, and it really spoke to a lot of people who were artists and writers, and it said to them, this art form is not dead.
I'm just wondering whether there's an Iron Giant just above your head on a shelf, Stephan, behind you. There's it is.
There's quite a few.
I recognised it.
Along with Galactus.
I sent an image to Sam earlier. When he comes back, maybe he can show it, which is because people have been asking me to do Iron Giant sketch, for like ever, and so I was always looking for like, okay, what cool way, what else can I do with this? And then I don't know how it came about, but this idea to do a Hollywood, because I was like, okay, well, what happens to, let's imagine that how Hogarth grow past the movie, right, grows up, and the giant comes back, and they have space adventures to get, what I mean? And so it's just like, I was in the market to do like a Hollywood homage. So
brilliant.
So I did a Hollywood homage by way of the Iron Giant, and so Sam can share the painting when it comes, like,
as soon as he gets back.
Yeah, he better come back now.
We'll get him back. He's
obviously
put
his
kid to bed.
So, but yeah, what was great about that that movie is like, I've always, I hate saying this, but I of course love the art form of animation, but there's a lot of animated movies that don't speak to me just because, and I'm not saying they're bad or anything, but just for my own interest, just because there's those animated tropes, the singing sidekicks and all that stuff, which is great, clearly it's people dig it, and and it's but it's not where my taste goes. I like, because I feel like it's very easy for that kind of stuff to become a filter that doesn't really fully let you engage with themes or with genre and stuff. Like, it always becomes animation does X as opposed to, hey, let's just do X, right? And so when I first met with Brad for the engine thing, and I was like blown away because, well, first I have a funny story, but I'll tell you later. It was a project that first we all knew Brad. He, like I was telling Shane earlier, Brad was not super well known to the wide audience yet, because he was not as well known as a figure as he is now. But within the industry, we knew he was a real director, right? And I don't mean like somebody who just happened to be directed animated stuff. I mean, he was a director, and so just working with him was like, but also this project, who was dealing with a lot of the cool stuff that I'm into, the sci-fi, all that stuff, right? But also that it was, we always said it's not going to be an animated movie, is in the tropey sense. It's going to be a movie that it just happens to be animated, which to me, again, it's what I'm saying is purely a matter of taste. People can feel completely differently about it. It's totally fine. But for me, because there's very often this question that people asked in the industry for a long time, which is, well, why are we doing it in animation? What's the point of doing it in animation? Well, because you can't do it in live action. But to me, it's ridiculous. It's like saying that the minute you have photographs, you paintings are not relevant anymore. No, paintings are still valid because they have a different point of view on something, right? So to me, if you have a whimsical, abstract art form like animation, I want that thing having a point of view on something real. If I have an abstract art form giving me a point of view on an abstract subject, then it just, to me, because an audience, just becomes a hat on the hat, and I'm a lot less interested. That's why I love anime so much, because like you look, like the Miyazaki, Totoro and stuff like that. That world is whimsical, yes, but it's so real, it's so grounded, it's so that I want to see animation's take on this little village that feels so real, not in a naturalistic kind of way, but because it's very tasteful, but in its intentions. It's not sugar coated by some sort of trope that comes in between you and the thing. So so the ability to just the opportunity to work on that was just amazing, and we felt like we were doing something. I don't like to use the word important for anything we do, because I don't think it's that important, but at least relevant. And
it has, but over the years though, it has become
a very important
animated film that people, and I don't think it's an age thing, that people still go back to as a classic example. And I think that's the real test, isn't it? That decades later, people are still returning to it. It still stands out as a masterful piece of storytelling, from the animation to the story, even to this day. You can't say that with
Thanks for that, Sam.
No, Sam back on again. Bad.
Sorry,
Sam. Stephan, you were cut off then.
Oh, no worries. Well, Sam, if you're for shits and giggles, since you're back, do you want to look at that Iron Giant?
There's some artwork there, Sam.
Whilst he does that, Stephan, you can tell.
Oh yeah. So I was gonna say, no, oh, there it is.
Eee. Lovely.
Very Wally Wood. You can see that, particularly in the design of the spacesuit.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That classic round space helmet.
Ship in the back too, right? Like in the far, distance. So that was really fun. That was really fun to do. But No, well, no, you're right, and I don't want to undersell like the meaningfulness of what we do, but I'll tell you something. That's something I've discovered through the comics experience by virtue of the cons. Right when I started doing the cons 10 years ago, and again it became like a big thing where we're doing like 10. There's some years we're doing 15 big cons.
Wow.
There was towns where we had 400 square feet, and so it really became a thing. And then as you come back to the same town year after year, there's people come in and more people come in, and they become their first stop at the show, and so on and so forth. But that experience, and see, I'm a pretty kind of talkative people, so if we were in real life, I would shake your hand and stuff like that. I must have shaken over 100,000 hands of individual people and had conversations with them at shows in the last 10 years, and that completely transformed my entire relationship with storytelling, which prior, because you work at a studio and you don't know, like
you're isolated, aren't you? Yeah.
Here you go. The movie made $7 billion. Oh, good. I'm not singing. It's so great. The movie lost $7 billion. Well, you still need me for the next one, so whatever. You know what I mean? So, but like when you start going to the shows and you meet people and you have conversation and they let you in on how this work has meant something in their lives as some sort of guiding light or whatever. I've had conversations that I would hate to betray like the confidence, but people whose families have to go to the goofy stuff, like there's this one guy who told me, hey man, I had this sea diving accident and I was in a hyperbaric chamber for 3 weeks, and the only thing that kept me sane is reading Silver over and over. And I'm like, okay, that's funny. But there's some really, really gripping ones where people, where going back to seeing the Iron Giant in the theaters when it came out became this act of reunion for a family that had been shattered by some event and stuff like that. Honestly, we would get choked up at the booth, and sometimes just thinking about it, I still have the emotional memory that makes me choke up again. You know what I mean? So it is important, but not in the way that we think out of ego. It's not important in the sense of look at me. It's important. It's like whatever I did, like there's a guy, or I can't remember if it's a guy or a girl actually, but there's somebody who once told me at a show that a movie, which is probably the worst movie I ever worked on, saved them from suicide.
Wow.
So I was like, well, you know what? Then I'm really glad we get to make that movie. Although as a movie, it didn't turn out good. But if it saved at least one person, are you kidding me? It's worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it is important, but not from the self-important kind
of not as a self-important thing, but important to the effect that it's had on other people, basically. Yeah, and exactly. It has. I mean, like my memories of Iron Giant, just to share my story, is, because it's a story over, for me, it was about friendship, right. And I watched it for the first time with a really close friend of mine, and we're still very close friends. He's moved out of the country, but we still talk about it. And it's just one of those very special sort of memories of spending time with a friend, and you just associate those memories, don't you? And not every film does that. Not every film latches onto the memory of when you watch it. There's some films you'll watch and it's like, I don't really remember what I was doing when I was watching that movie. I was probably sitting at home eating a pizza. But some movies, you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing. And Iron Giant is one of those movies for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And I think it's because, it's all those, if it's a movie that's coming from, or a book, by the way, that kind of, because the thing that I always say is that we're in the business of telling the most universal stories in the weirdest way possible, and it, that's what it is, right? It's the weirdness is what gets you in, gets the dukes to come down, as Brad would say, actually. But then we can talk, and I mean, and this is that shared humanity, that even the villain is not a mustache twirling kind of abstraction, but it's actually a person who in their own mind think that they're doing what they need to be doing, you know what I mean? And that's how do you get to feel to how come what happened to you so that you get to feel that way. It's not about condoning or but it's about not judging, which is different, and letting the story process kind of judge itself through the choices that the characters make, but through that we have a shared humanity, and the thing I always say is, I don't follow the political situation in Britain very closely. I know roughly what's going on, but I can tell you, in America, it's it's tense, and there's a lot of people who hate each other, and I do have my opinions. I've definitely know exactly what I think about the situation, but the truth is, when I go to, and again, unfortunately, I've been able to go in the last couple of years because of COVID, but for the 10 years before that, I went to blue state, red states, purple states. And when people come in and we talk story and we connect, well, guess what? We're not shooting each other.
Those things don't matter anymore, do they?
You know what I mean? And so it is important also in that sense, is that, and to me, if you want again, I'm going to volunteer some hot takes and theories, but that's why I think there's so much, a lot of the big entertainment franchises have been under attack, toxically, It's because at the end of the day, that's the only place in society where we all still go meet together. That we all still love Star Wars, we all still love Marvel, we all still love Game of Thrones, we all still we all connect on those things where, hey, maybe I think I'm Luke and you're Darth Vader, or maybe you think you're Luke and I'm Darth Vader. It doesn't matter. We're all, at least we all think we're Luke. So as long as we all think we're Luke, then we're all at the end of the day after the same thing, and we may differ, but we'll get there. So it's interesting how it can.
I like that. I like that way of looking at it, Stephan. It's very
well. Whether you're on the right or the left or in between, these universal stories about moral lessons, and right-wing politics and left-wing politics still try to talk about what they think is good, what is bad, and what is moral. And I think because these are so universal, right down to the very structure, right down to the very archetypes, like you said, people can project themselves onto these characters. People were, as younger people, I was once Luke as a child. Maybe I'm closer to Darth Vader or Obi-Wan Kenobi as I get older.
Hopefully Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ollie.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. Although Darth Vader's got the cooler outfit, hasn't he, really?
That's right. Let's get real, right? But no, that you're absolutely right. And I think like life, I think, and I guess I've been through enough of it right now. I've been so far, this far along, whatever it is, to see that life is a series of understanding things you couldn't understand before because you haven't lived through it yet, and you go through those. It's like, oh, that's what that was. Now I get it, and I think movies do that too. Like, and so that when there's truth to a character, even though, like the example I always give is the witch in Snow White, right? Like I just remember when my oldest kid turned, teenager, and I was like dropping them off at school and going like, and they're teenagers, yes, right? and then you see them and you go and they go like talking to their friends, and you see that they're young, and you can see that no matter how much you love what you're doing in life, at this point you're on some rails, right? And you see them, and there's this air that the world is fully open to them and they can be whatever they want to be. And you look at that and you go like, fuck you, you know what I mean? And that day you understand the witch in Snow White.
Yeah.
In the way
we've all got the witch. We've all got the witch in us, haven't we? In those moments. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
every time we're jealous of youth, every time we envy the young, we are the witch. Right. Yeah.
But until you've been that parent that you realize, I always say, you're born and you're the main character of your story, and then you have kids and they're cute secondary characters in your story, and then one day you turn around and you're just driving them to their activities and you're the secondary character.
You're not even the mentor.
And that's a hard transition for anybody.
Yeah.
Right? but so if there's something, it's for some people it's harder than others. But again, those are truth that you find in storytelling that you may not understand because you're not reached that point in life, or maybe you're going in a different direction, but still there's an air of truth to that storytelling that sticks to it, and you still receive it.
And it's sometimes you rediscover a story, don't you? Like a movie or a comic where you relate to a different character for that very reason. And you loved it as a kid for one reason, and then you love it 30 years later for completely different reasons because a different character suddenly resonates with you. It's great. It gives the whole story longevity for you, doesn't it?
It does. That's the great joy of all those books that I have behind me, that a lot of them I had when I was 10 years old. You know what I mean? Is that sometimes I crack them open, and like I was saying earlier, sometimes if the mold doesn't kill me, then I look at it like, whoa, that's what that was. I had no concept to understand. I had no context to even see it then, and now I see it. But guess what? It did spoke to me at the time because the richness and the truth of it shone through, no matter whether I could understand it or not at the time. It's like listening to your records, and you're like, whoa, there was a trumpet in this, you know what I mean? But it's just
hearing these sounds for
depends what state of mind you're in.
That's great though, isn't it, when you hear a new sound on a record that you just didn't notice for years, and suddenly you hear something in the mix that just, well, how did I miss that? Your brain suddenly just takes it for granted
because you were listening to tapes in a child, and you're listening to crappy MIDI systems. Now we can afford better sound quality speakers.
That is true. That is true.
That is true.
So we've gone over our hour, but before we do go, I think it would be wrong to go without giving What If a little mention. Which is one of your most recent projects.
Yeah, talking about worlds of weirdness. Yeah, so you're allowed to crank it up to 11 on that show, aren't you?
That must have been fun.
Yeah, it's great. It was. It's very intimidating when you first come in, because you work with people who, I mean, like when I started there, I mean, and although I was more than familiar. I mean, I've known these characters since my parents' store when I was 8 years old, right? But still, they have their current iteration, they have their current the MCU version, stuff like that.
Yes,
and so you arrive in there, and it's very intimidating because you're working with a bunch of filmmakers there who have been making those movies for like 10 plus years at this point, and 20 movies or whatever, and they know these characters so well and in depth and stuff. And there's a learning curve to like, whoa, but then at some point you kind of catch up and you go, no, I got this. I've known this, but it's intimidating.
But once you get into it and you start and you've realized that, all those years reading those books have more than qualified you to do the work.
That's right. You just need to get to a place where you go like, all right, they want you for what you do, just do what you do and you'll be fine. And turns out it's the case, but there's definitely an intimidation factor, because you're talking about a universe and a cinematic universe that is so successful. It's probably there's never been anything like it in the history of movies, honestly. It's incredible, and the quality of it, it's just amazing, and again, the people who are making those movies, from the execs to the everybody, there's just really, I've worked in movies for a long time. I worked with a lot of people, but I'm telling you, like, these guys are smart. They know their stuff, and they're also really nice, it was very nice. So it's been an incredibly pleasant experience for me.
And again, it's one of those universes, picking up a point we talked about only about 10 minutes ago, where it connects with people. Because it's such a rich universe in terms of stories and characters. It is a collective experience, whether they're watching it on the TV when it drops on a Wednesday when it came out, or maybe in years to come talking to you about it at conventions in the same way as they talked about Silver hopefully about Palomino in the future. Yeah. It has got that connection to it. I think that's part of the MCU's success.
Absolutely. Like when we dropped the trailer like 2 years ago, the very, very first trailer at D23, like 3 weeks later, I was in at the New York Comic Con for Dark Planet, and we already had people in cosplay.
Wow, that's when you know you've landed.
that's when and this I'm gonna say, talk about the deep experiences of conventions. The first time I got the actual legit silver cosplayers.
Oh, really?
Honestly, I thought
That's cool. That's cool.
And did they hunt you out especially?
Because, like, it's obviously Marvel has the reach for people to be aware of these things and connect with what you want to, but when you start something completely independently, and that it does reach people enough so that they feel compelled to dress as the characters and
that's nice.
Play act those characters, you feel like, okay, well, I guess I was not like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, like in my basement, just writing nonsense. I guess it's there's a point to it, so
wait until it gets on Netflix.
Geez, like, God willing, God's willing,
I'll certainly be watching it. A little question about What If. A lot of people have commented on the visual aspects of it, the stylings of it, and mentioned the Fleischer cartoons. But I understand that the influence isn't predominantly Fleischer cartoons. I understand it's from elsewhere.
I think there's. I will take that Fleischer cartoons because it's wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But so that's, I take it as a compliment. I think the reason why people are saying that is because, as we were saying before, there is not a lot of animation that is not Saturday morning that has superheroes.
Yeah.
Again, here's the thing. It goes back to exactly what I was talking about earlier. The Fleischer cartoons were doing Superman for real. They were not doing animation the Superman. They were doing Superman.
Yeah.
So there's that, and like that's something that we've seen. Of course, there's been some great animation from like the DC stuff, but but there's not all things animation, considered, there's not a lot of real superhero stuff that that really deals directly with the subject matter, so that your mind goes to that. And also the fact that there's the period aspect, that our first episode was the Peggy Carter World War II episode, so obviously it brings you to that to that era. One of the major influences in terms of character design was Jesse Linedecker, and classic illustrators of the the 40s and stuff, 30s, 40s. And those were also the influence, when you look at like the classic John Buscema, all that stuff, they were all influenced by this art form of that's come and gone now, which was those commercial illustrators of the 30s, 40s, 50s. And that kind of disappeared now, and so there was a tradition there. And and comics aspire to be artistically like a worksman version of that, if you will. And so by going back to something like Linedecker, it helps us, which we're kind of, so if you bring the sophistication of the Linedecker look and you cross reference it with the energy of the Kirby and the Buscema of it, then you get to what we're trying to do.
That makes sense.
And so it brings a sophistication to the look, and it signals to people that, hey, this is animation, but it's a new kind, like it's a new aspiration. I don't know how to explain it better than this, but it's like we're trying to take the art form to a place to a visual paradigm, if you will, that you have not seen before.
It definitely did stand out. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they saw that first trailer for What If, were just stunned, by how different it was to every other animated show out there. It certainly had its own identity immediately.
Yeah,
which is why I think, which is a huge part of why it was just so successful. As apart from the fact that it's Marvel and the stories were great and the voice acting was great.
oh yeah,
It had its own identity without a doubt. And
no, I agree. I think it's very important for animation. Like I feel like animation as an art form is having a moment, with the advent of the streamers and the fact that we finally now can do stuff that the audience has been ready for a long time. It's just maybe the execs, the studios weren't ready, but the audience was, but now we do it. So, but we not only need to give it to them, but we also now need to make it clear that it is that new thing. It's not like the old thing. So it has to be as new on the outside as it is new on the inside.
I think. I like the style of artwork that they used on Star Wars Visions on Disney, and I also like the choice Mark Miller made with taking Super Crooks from the comic and having it as a Japanese anime with the music as well. I love that idea. A very, very different experience to reading the comics, and so I think you're right. There is a, dare I say, yet another renaissance in animation. Certainly the bigger studios like Disney are able to push forward on that, but equally they can do stuff like the Bad Batch, which is more cartoony again in the Star Wars. But for me, watching What If, it was almost, there's a legitimacy there. It is part of the MCU. It is canon, as we're beginning to learn, as the dark Stephen Strange is going to have more to play in the MCU, and I think that's what gets fans excited as well.
I think it was great, wasn't it, to know that it was canon, and this wasn't just a side project. It wasn't just animation.
Yeah,
it was,
it's not sitting at the kids' table. You know what I'm saying?
No,
it is that, and that's the thing. Also, why I was really attracted to the project, and it's because there is no difference in the creation process except for the pipeline that it ends up being animated as opposed to being shot in live action. I mean, by the way, those live action movie have more than half of it is animation these days.
Yeah, of course.
So, but that set aside, right? Just in the aesthetic. But so, except for the aesthetic, there is no separation. In the writing, in the how it's conceived, in the seriousness to which it's approached. And by seriousness, I don't mean like taking yourself seriously. I just mean in the
well, they're not breaking out in song every 5 minutes.
No. There's a word I'm looking for that for a reason is escaping me. But there's the integrity.
Integrity.
Yeah, that's the word. That the integrity of it is exactly the same as anything else that comes out of the studio, and that's where I was like, sign me up.
And I dare say you're deep into plotting and preparing season 2 for people as well. I'm not going to ask because I know you're not going to be able to say anything, but I'm assuming
I'm just doing some super cool stuff that I can't say absolutely nothing about.
Excellent. That's good enough for me. That's
exciting.
At least we know it's coming. At least we know it's coming our way, Stephan. That's all I wanted to know.
Yes,
I never actually.
You'll have to. Yeah.
Sorry, Stephan. We never actually got to show the Palomino pages, did we? Sam, can you put those up, the color comic pages, just so that we can give them a plug? He's getting there. The Palomino pages, Sam. There we go. Beautiful stuff.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very different from Silver. So, like, this might be hard to procure for your UK readers at the moment because the first volume. So as you were saying with Dark Planet, we do a Kickstarter for every release. So like by the time the books are ready to go to print, we do a Kickstarter so our backers can get it before everybody else, and then it goes to the conventions, and then it goes to the comic shops. And so we did the Kickstarter for this spring 2020, and then this little thing called COVID happened. And for a while, the stores were closed and stuff like that, and we're sure exactly. So, and the conventions too. So we did not release the book we postponed the release to the direct market, and we have none in convention. So the book is only available at this exact moment on the Dark Planet Comics website.
Wow.
And the thing is, because shipping to England is, on a case by case basis, is so insanely expensive, we don't offer it, just because people would be paying more for shipping than they would be paying for the book. So now I'm deep into the creation of the second book. So it should be done by the end of the year, and it's going to be a massive 270-page volume. So it's not decided yet whether we'll then at that point release volume 1 and volume 2, or if we're gonna combine the two in one kind of massive kind of tome,
the compendium. Yeah,
and that is what's going to go out to the store. So for the UK readers, I have to apologize. There's no easy way for you to get a physical copy of this right now, and I need to organize digital distribution, which we've also held back because until we know where we're doing the physical, we don't like starting the digital. So this is, if you're in the US, go to darkplanetcomics.com. If you're anywhere else, please be patient. It's coming.
Well, hopefully Diamond will be able to distribute it. They
want to, but the question is whether it will be this first trade, which everyone
just going to rub our noses in it now and show us a trade.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can't have it, sorry.
You can't have this.
But yeah, it'll be worth the wait. It's a really fun story. It's an LA crime story, and LA has been my home for 30 years, so I love this town. My kids have, grown here and stuff. So, and I'm also used to be a musician, so I've been playing clubs since I was not old enough to go in clubs because my mom would drive me, but so it's about a certain life. It takes place in 1981 in LA, in the world of the country music clubs here, and it's a crime story. It's noir as F, and but also the humor and it feels very. And whereas the Silver was very kind of black and white theater, very expressionistic, very kind of, this is very explicit. This is very, it's all lit. It's like in LA, like this thing. I don't know if you guys have been to LA, but it's this vibe that you walk around in the middle of the day and everything feels like quiet and eternal, and that nothing is going on, but under the surface, everything is going on.
Wow. You just need to know where to go.
You just need to, yeah, exactly. Or not to go.
Somewhere I'd love to visit, actually, just to experience it, because everybody I know who's been there has told me stories.
Well, it's the kind of place that you either love or hate at first sight.
Right.
I'll tell you this. For me, it was love. I just landed, got out of LAX 30 years ago, and I was like, that's it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying.
Wow.
There forever.
Yeah.
Well, Stephan, we've gone way over our hour. But you know what? It's been absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed this so much. I feel like I've been schooled, but it's been
definitely indirectly. It's been a masterclass. Now, Stephan, my daughter, she's 16, and she's out at the moment, but she wants to be an animator, and at the moment she's doing what I suppose a high school equivalent course, doing games design, because it's the only thing that she get close to animation.
Right.
So she was very excited that I was interviewing you tonight. So she will definitely be watching this to pick up some of your great tips on pacing, on scripting, on all sorts. It's been a real eye opener. So thank you for your pearls of wisdom and your great conversation.
No, it's a real pleasure, and good luck to your daughter. I think it's a wonderful career. Like sometimes at conventions and families show up. It's the teenager with two. And I'm looking like we're in Ohio or somewhere, right? And so there's no connect. People don't have any connection within in the industry, and so they come in, and the child has a portfolio, and you have two very anxious parents, and so I have to look at the portfolio, and the parents, I only have this question like, well, is my child going to starve and stuff like that? And I'm like, look around you. Who do you think made all this stuff? These are jobs. This don't appear on life. We're in the golden age of these careers. So I think it's wonderful. And
we no longer have to tell children or young people that they can't have a career in art or the arts. There's so much there. I remember, teachers trying to put me off when I was a kid. It's like, well, you'll never do. You're just wasting your time. Go and work in a factory or something. It's like, that's ridiculous. Everything has to be created. So it's a great time to be alive, I think, if you're a creative person. And we've got one last comment before we go from Andy Luke. Thanks for being so generous with your time and schooling, Stephan. Well hosted, Shane and Ollie. Well, thank you, Andy.
And you didn't cut out in the end, Shane, as much as I was fearing, so it all went well in the end. Happy ever after.
We got there in the end. So thanks again, Stephan. All the best with all your projects. I can't wait to read Palomino and and the new Silver as well, because I would love to read the end of that. And all the best. Have a great evening.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a real pleasure.